Well, Alabama got the absolute soul and will to live beat out of them this past Saturday in the SEC championship game, a rematch from a game played earlier in the season in Athens. This time, Georgia gets to win 28-7. And I want to talk about Alabama and just what's going on with them. And I want to start with this premise that they're soft, and I feel kind of responsible for starting this thing. And look, I'm not saying I'm wrong. I guess that's sort of an accurate description, but I think the problem, well, it's not a problem. Alabama fans would push back against that. Soft has such a negative connotation. And it's just like, you'd rather be almost anything other than soft when it comes to your football team. So, but what do we mean when we say that with Alabama, right? Because Alabama fans have been watching this Alabama team over the last couple of years. And if you haven't noticed a few things about this Alabama team, relative to the Alabama teams we're used to seeing in the past, specifically the last 10 to 15 years, then I mean, you're just not watching. And, the obvious thing sort of, well, they had Nick Saban and now they don't. Yeah, that is going to have an effect. And pretty much the entirety of the college football world tried to tell the Alabama fans that when Saban left and they brought in DeBoer. It's nothing against DeBoer in particular. It didn't matter who you brought in after Saban. It wasn't going to be as good as Saban. But specifically the last 2 years of Alabama under DeBoer, what are the issues? What's holding Alabama back? And I know they're headed to the playoffs, and that's great. But are there any Alabama fans watching that are giving Alabama any type of shot at all to do anything in the playoffs? I mean, they might not even win a game. It's basically a pick 'em on the road at Oklahoma. Oklahoma's a small 1 or a 2-point favorite. And honestly, I feel like Bama got pretty lucky in the draw. I don't think there's very many teams in this playoff field that Alabama can beat right now. And it's not a situation where they were great in the beginning of the year and got now they're somehow worse. I mean, their season is bookended with embarrassing performances. I mean, you've got the Florida State game in week 1. You've got the SEC championship game at the end. He had -3 yards rushing in that game, in the SEC championship game. Alabama, it's just mind-boggling. They played some good games this year. They looked good at times. I think probably that win against Georgia and Athens is the best they've looked all year. They played out of their minds in that game. They were 13 out of 16 on third down, which I don't care who you're playing. That's just a ridiculous stat line. Fast forward to this past weekend in the SEC championship game, I think they were 3 for 16 on third downs. And obviously Georgia had a lot to do with that. They got way better defensively over the course of the season, particularly when it comes to rushing the passer and the coverage in the back end. But the problem with Alabama, to get back to the soft thing, because that does come across as having an extremely negative connotation, and it sounds insulting rather than being like an honest critique of a team. And again, I know I'm partly to blame for that. This is a trash talk channel. So when we use the word soft around here, we mean it negatively. But when people say that Alabama is soft, what really are they saying? I've pointed out a couple of what I think are problems or issues with Alabama that fall under that kind of category or umbrella. And the first one is their inability to rush the ball. And this isn't something that just popped up in the SEC championship game. Every single time I've talked about Alabama this year, the first thing I have talked about is their inability to run the ball. Now, that obviously came to a head in the SEC championship game with the -3 yards rushing. And I know they were without Jam Miller, but Alabama fans have been telling me for 2 years that Jam Miller's not any good. And they spent all year this year telling me that Daniel Hill was better, and they wish Jam Miller would ride the bench. Well, you got your wish in the SEC championship game, and you saw what happened, -3 yards rushing. They also struggled to stop the run, and that was the case again in the SEC championship game. In fact, even when they beat Georgia back in Athens earlier in the year, Georgia ran for over 200 yards on them. I think they ran for 227 yards. But what really are we saying when we say Alabama soft? If I were to give an honest critique of it, rather than just labeling it soft as sort of an insult or a trash talking point, it's a philosophy and a mentality. And just like the philosophy and mentality and attitude of the team in the Saban days was a reflection of Saban, top down. And this is the case with any program, really, generally. Maybe there's an exception here or there, but a team sort of tends to take on the personality or the characteristics of their head coach or of their coaching staff. And the reality for Alabama is, you brought in KALEN DeBoer. This year, he brings Ryan Grubb with him. And West Coast guys, they have a certain mentality, a certain philosophy, right? They have a style. And every coach does. They have a sort of a wish list of how they want games to go. How do they want to win? What kind of team do they want to be? And I think this has become a problem for Alabama. I think it's a top-down, and I'm not saying KALEN DeBoer is KALEN DeBoer is not a bad coach. He's a really good coach. He's definitely a top 10 coach. Even maybe you hate KALEN DeBoer, you hate Alabama or something, you don't want to give him any credit. Even if you're that, he's top 15. I mean, can we agree on that? I mean, look at his record against coaches like Kirby Smart, like Steve Sarkisian. I mean, the list goes on. The guy's got some good wins, and he hasn't had like the fall off the cliff season. I mean, they're in the playoffs. So I know this video is going to come off as like, Alabama's terrible. I'm not saying that they're terrible, but if you're an Alabama fan, are you happy with where Alabama is at right now? I don't think you are. Do you think Alabama's beating Oklahoma on the road in Norman? If somehow they do you think they're winning another game after that? I mean, the Alabama team that we're watching play right now, the Alabama program that we're all watching right now, is a far cry from what we used to see in there. And I guess the point of this video is not for me to tell you why that is. I don't have all the answers. I'm asking. Specifically the Alabama fans, like, what do you think the problems and issues are? You were never going to stay where you were under Saban for eternity, right? Saban was the greatest coach ever, in my opinion. So you lose him, it doesn't matter who you replace him with. There's going to be some type of fall off. But specifically this version of Alabama, why is it this way? Why? Ryan Williams has all the talent in the world. The guy, highlight catches, circus type catches and moves. He's a problem in space. He's hard to tackle. He's fast. He's quick. He's twitchy. He's got great hands. All of those things. Guy disappears for half the season. I hesitate to bring it up in this video because I'm really not trying to turn this into a trash talk video, but it's hard for me not to talk about this when we're talking about sort of what are Alabama's problems or what does Alabama need to do to get better, because to me, they sort of tie together. But the teddy bear thing with Ryan Williams is just like, forget whether that would have happened under Nick Saban. We all know the answer. Can you name how many other programs in the country can you name where you think that might even happen, where a player would just walk around with a teddy bear? It's really strange. So you have that, their inability to run the ball, and this is where the soft thing comes from. And soft, I think, can be a legitimate like football critique of a team. Again, the problem is it's viewed it through a trash talk lens. So when you use the word soft, it just comes off as demeaning or as an insult. So I'm trying not to use that word, but like Alabama gets whipped on the line of scrimmage. What would you call that? You're talking about a team that is almost dead last in the SEC in running the ball. What would you call that? They struggle to stop the run. What would you call that? We can all think of games Nick Saban lost as head coach at Alabama. Do you recall him losing a game like he lost this past Saturday in that fashion? 28-7, where they just were not competitive? They shouldn't have scored in that game. The only touchdown drive they had, and this wasn't the referee's fault, these were actual penalties, but Georgia committed, I think, 3 15-yard penalties that kept that scoring drive alive. In that one drive, there was the unsportsmanlike conduct penalty on DeMello Jones. There was a roughing the passer. I think there was a pass interference. And that was the only points Alabama was able to put on the board. And that came in the fourth quarter. And it's hard to critique Alabama going back to the first Alabama-Georgia game because Alabama won the game. So coming out of that game, any criticism or concern that you had about Alabama was met by Alabama fans by just going, well, we won the game. There were signs in the first game. There were signs against Florida State. There were signs against Oklahoma. There were signs against Auburn of some of the problems and issues I think that this team had and was going to have. But, I mean, you go back to the first game against Georgia and Athens, they didn't score a point in the second half. Now, Georgia offensively was a different thing in September than they are now. Georgia has clearly evolved as a team over the course of the season. The first time Georgia and Alabama played, Georgia had no pass rush at all. In fact, entering that game, they were dead last in the country in sacks and pressure rate, or almost dead last. The last month of the season, Georgia really cranked that up. They've been getting after the quarterback pretty good the last 5 or 6 weeks or so, and so that was a big difference in the game. But Alabama didn't score a point in the second half against Georgia in September. They didn't score a point in the first half in December. That's 4 quarters straight. Alabama went without scoring a single point against Georgia. I'd be curious if Nick Saban ever went 4 quarters against any team ever without scoring a point. Then you go into the third. They didn't score in the third quarter. It's 5 straight quarters of football against Georgia that Alabama didn't score a point. And, we haven't spent much time breaking down the game. I don't really do that. But if you watch the SEC championship game, you have an Alabama team who cannot run the ball, right? Now, to their credit, they still tried. You really can't just totally abandon the run, specifically in the first half. I thought they did a good job of sticking to the run game, even though they were just running into a brick wall over and over and over again. You just have to do that, especially when you're playing a team like Georgia, who in this second matchup this past weekend has developed a pass rush. You can't put yourself in a situation where the defense, specifically the front 4 or the front 7, know that you're passing the ball every time, because then you've got, 4 or 5 pass rushers on the field who don't have to worry about the run. They can pin their ears back, get after the quarterback. And you saw that happen in the second half. So you've got an Alabama team that can't run the ball. By the time the second half comes around, they're down 21-0. They have to abandon the run altogether at that point. They're throwing pretty much on every down. Georgia know it. The defensive line knows it. The linebackers know it. The secondary knows it. The coaching staff knows it. They're calling all kinds of different blitzes and pressures and twists and stunts, and they're showing pressure and dropping 8. They had Ty Simpson in a blender. I mean, he was just a deer in headlights. And Ty Simpson's a good quarterback. But if you put almost any quarterback or any offense in a situation where they have to throw the ball almost every single time, which was the case for Alabama in the second half of that game, and you turn the defense loose on them, it's going to be hard for any offense to be successful under those circumstances, and that's what happened. So you get back to the original question, which is what is going on. I think it's a philosophical and a schematic problem at Alabama. I think they are trying sort of, a square peg, round hole type of situation here at Bama. They are trying to import what worked for Kalen DeBoer on the West Coast, not just into Alabama, but into an Alabama team that is playing an SEC schedule filled with defenses that have NFL pass rushers, NFL corners, NFL safeties. And it's just not working. And I can already feel some of the Alabama fans pushing back in the comment section like, Lou's exaggerating. It's not as bad as it seems. We're in the playoffs. Yeah, you're in the playoffs, but look, y'all, we all watched Alabama play the last month of the season. And they got into the SEC championship game based on tiebreakers. They're not a very good team. Their offense is horrendous. They struggle to move the ball against almost everybody they play. The loss to Florida State is absolutely horrendous. Losing to Georgia is not embarrassing, but it's like it's like with Texas. It's not that Texas lost to Georgia. It's that they weren't competitive and they got destroyed. And the same thing happened with Alabama. I mean, 28-7 in the SEC championship game. And again, just weren't competitive. No fight along the lines of scrimmage. And so the thing about Alabama being soft, I think it's accurate, but it needs some definition again, because when people hear that, oh, your team is soft, because I kept getting this response from Alabama fans all season long. I would say, yeah, man, Alabama struggles to run the ball. They can't stop the run. Ryan Williams is running around with a teddy bear on dinner dates. Kind of soft. And then, what the immediate response from Alabama fans is, well, we beat Georgia. Congratulations, I guess. You did beat Georgia in September for the second year in a row. And for the second year in a row, that's going to be the pinnacle of your season, is a regular season win in September over Georgia. In both of those seasons, last season and this season, you went on to do nothing. You're not doing anything this year. You didn't win the SEC championship. You're not winning the national title. You'd be a miracle if you beat Oklahoma. And meanwhile, in both of those years, Georgia went on to win the SEC and to make the playoffs, and Georgia's got a chance to make a run in the playoffs this year because, unlike Alabama, they have gotten significantly better over the course of the season, and they're playing their best football at the end of the season. But I don't want to turn this into a Georgia thing, but some decisions need to be made at Alabama, because I just don't think the overarching plan that Kalen DeBoer has for Alabama is a successful one. I don't think philosophically, schematically, just the style of football that Kalen DeBoer and specifically Ryan Grubb, the offensive coordinator this year, that style of football that they want to run, to me, is just not conducive for success in the SEC, or honestly, even in the playoffs. I mean, can you imagine Alabama up against Ohio State or even Oregon? Indiana would probably have their way with Bama. It's just and it's got nothing to do with the talent, because you can go look at the talent index. Alabama's got a top 5 team in the country in terms of talent. It's the system, the philosophy, the mentality. It just reminds me more. What I'm seeing from Alabama right now reminds me a lot more of Lincoln Riley at Oklahoma in 2018 than it does anything that's going to win anything now. So I'll be interested to see what the comments are on this video, because I'm not trying to talk shit here. I'm not trying to turn this into a trash talk video. These are my honest thoughts and opinions on Alabama. And to be honest with you, these are the same thoughts I've had all year. I don't normally make an attempt to express them in this way, because this is a trash talk channel. So a lot of times when I'm talking about Alabama after they've played bad, I'm just coming on here laughing at them, pointing at them, and putting their helmet over there, telling them they're soft and they can't run the ball and their offensive line is garbage. And no fan likes to hear that. I get it. So you get automatic pushback. And because Bama beat Georgia in September, they just go right to that. Oh, well, you're just mad that Georgia lost to Bama. Well, yeah, I'm mad every time Georgia loses. But who would you rather be right now, me or you? You'd rather be me. Have a great day.